The summer of 2018 was like any other summer in Millfield, Ohio. Children rode their bikes down quiet streets lined with oak trees. Neighbors waved to each other from their front porches. The Henderson family was getting ready for another cookout in their backyard. They did this every 4th of July. Tom Henderson stood by his grill, flipping burgers and hot dogs. He worked at the local car dealership and had lived on Maple Street for 15 years. His wife, Linda, taught 2nd grade at the elementary school, down the road. Everyone in town knew the Hendersons. They were the kind of family that made Millfield feel safe and normal. Next door, the Miller family was setting up chairs on their lawn. Mark Miller carried cold drinks from his house while his wife Beth arranged plates on their picnic table. Mark worked as a manager at the hardware store. Beth stayed home to take care of their house and garden. The Millers had moved to Maple Street 12 years ago when their son was just 5 years old. The two families had been neighbors and friends for over a decade. Their boys grew up playing together in both backyards. During winters, they built snowmen together. In summers, they ran through sprinklers and caught fireflies in mason jars. Jake Henderson was now 17 years old and stood 6 feet tall. His brown hair was always perfectly styled. His smile could light up any room. Everyone at Millfield High School knew Jake. He was the quarterback of the football team. Teachers loved him because he was polite and got good grades. Girls wanted to date him. Boys wanted to be his friend. Jake had dreams that stretched far beyond the borders of Millfield. College scouts had been calling the Henderson house since his sophomore year. Ohio State University wanted him to play football for them. Jake spent hours every day practicing in his backyard. He threw passes to an old tire hanging from the oak tree. His father Tom often watched from the kitchen window with pride in his eyes. On this particular 4th of July, Jake wore his red Millfield High School jersey. The number 12 was printed big and bold on his back. He helped his father with the grill and made jokes that made everyone laugh. Jake had that special quality that made people feel good when they were around him. Ryan Miller was also 17, but very different from his best friend Jake. Ryan was shorter and thinner with messy, blonde hair that fell into his green eyes. While Jake was loud and confident, Ryan was quiet and thoughtful. He carried a camera everywhere he went. Photography was his passion. He loved capturing moments that other people might miss. Ryan spent most of his free time in the dark room at school or in his bedroom editing photos on his computer. His room was filled with pictures he had taken around Millfield. There were photos of old barns, empty railroad tracks, and close-ups of flowers in his mother's garden. Ryan saw beauty in ordinary things that other people walked past without noticing. The two boys could not have been more different, but they had been best friends since they were children. When Jake scored a touchdown, Ryan was always there cheering from the sidelines with his camera. When Ryan had a photography show at school, Jake was in the front row clapping louder than anyone else. Their friendship seemed natural to everyone who knew them. Mrs. Patterson, who lived across the street, often said they were like two pieces of a puzzle that fit together perfectly. Jake brought Ryan out of his shell. Ryan kept Jake grounded and humble. At school, they ate lunch together every day. Jake would tell Ryan about football practice and his plans for college. Ryan would show Jake his latest photographs and talk about the art classes he wanted to take after graduation. They walked to classes together and studied together after school. Other students at Millfield High School accepted their friendship without question. It was normal to see Jake and Ryan together in the hallways. Jake protected Ryan from bullies, who sometimes picked on quieter kids. Ryan helped Jake with his English homework when writing essays became difficult. Teachers noticed their bond too. Mrs. Roberts, who taught both boys in her English class, later remembered how they always sat next to each other. She said Jake would often ask Ryan for advice about assignments. Ryan would quietly help Jake understand difficult books and poems. The Henderson and Miller families spent many evenings together. They had barbecues in summer and watched football games in winter. The parents played cards while Jake and Ryan disappeared into one of their bedrooms to play video games or work on homework. Linda Henderson treated Ryan like a second son. She always made sure to cook extra food when she knew Ryan would be coming over for dinner. Beth Miller did the same for Jake. She kept his favorite snacks in their kitchen pantry. Both families went to the same church on Sundays. Jake and Ryan sat together in the back row during services. They would pass notes to each other when the sermons got too long. Their parents would smile and shake their heads at their silly behavior. During the summer before their senior year, everything seemed perfect in both households. Jake had just finished another successful football season. College letters were arriving in the mail almost every week. His future looked bright and full of promise. Ryan had won first place in a regional photography contest. His picture of an old covered bridge had been chosen from hundreds of entries. The local newspaper had written a story about him. His parents were proud and excited about his artistic talents. Nobody in Millfield could have predicted what would happen in the months ahead. The town was peaceful and safe. Serious crimes were rare. The biggest problems were usually teenagers drinking beer behind the grocery store or driving too fast down Main Street. Jake and Ryan seemed like normal teenagers with normal problems. They worried about tests and homework like everyone else. They complained about chores and curfews. They looked forward to graduation and starting their adult lives. On that warm 4th of July evening in 2018, both families watched fireworks together from the Henderson backyard. Jake and Ryan sat on the grass next to each other, looking up at the colorful explosions in the dark sky. Their parents sat in lawn chairs behind them, talking quietly about everyday things. Nobody knew that this would be one of the last peaceful moments the two families would share together. The friendship that had lasted for over 12 years was about to change in ways that nobody could imagine. The perfect neighborhood on Maple Street would soon become the center of a tragedy that would shock the entire town of Millfield. The first day of senior year at Millfield High School started like every other year before it. Jake Henderson walked through the front doors wearing his Letterman jacket. Students called out his name from across the hallway. Teachers smiled and waved at their star student. Everything looked normal from the outside. Ryan Miller followed quietly behind his best friend, carrying his worn camera bag over his shoulder. He had grown his hair longer over the summer. His green eyes seemed more serious than before. While Jake stopped to talk with other football players, Ryan kept walking toward his first class. Something had changed between the two boys during the summer months, but nobody else noticed it at first. They still sat together at lunch. They still walked to classes together. But there were small differences that only they could feel. Jake seemed more careful about how close he sat to Ryan. He would move his chair a few inches away during study sessions. When they walked together, Jake made sure there was space between them. He started talking more about girls and dating. These changes confused Ryan and made him feel lonely. Ryan had always been quiet, but now he became even more withdrawn. He spent extra time in the school darkroom developing his photographs. His pictures from that fall were different too. They were darker and more emotional than his usual work. Many of them were close-up shots of Jake taken when Jake was not looking. Truth was that something important had happened between Jake and Ryan during the last week of summer vacation. They had been camping in the woods behind the Miller house like they had done many times before. But this time was different. On the second night of their camping trip, they sat by their small fire talking about their fears for senior year. Ryan had been honest about his worries. He was scared that Jake would leave for college and forget about their friendship. He was afraid of being alone in Millfield without his best friend. Jake tried to comfort Ryan that night. He told Ryan that their friendship would never change. He promised that distance would not matter. As they talked, something shifted between them. The conversation became more personal and deeper than ever before. Ryan had been carrying a secret for months. He had feelings for Jake that went beyond friendship. These feelings scared him because he had never felt this way about anyone before. That night by the campfire, Ryan found the courage to tell Jake the truth about his emotions. Jake was surprised by Ryan's confession, but he did not pull away. Instead, Jake admitted that he had been having similar feelings too. He had been trying to ignore these emotions because they made him confused about himself. Both boys were scared and uncertain about what their feelings meant. That night changed everything between them. They shared their first kiss under the stars. It was awkward and nervous, but it felt right to both of them. They stayed up all night talking about their emotions and what this meant for their friendship. When they returned home from camping, both boys felt excited, but also terrified. They had crossed a line that they could never uncross. They had discovered something about themselves that they were not ready to share with anyone else. Jake was especially worried about what people would think. Football was his life, and he knew that many of his teammates and coaches had strong opinions about relationships like his and Ryan's. His parents had always talked about him finding a nice girl and getting married someday. The idea of disappointing them made Jake feel sick to his stomach. Ryan was also scared, but for different reasons. He had always felt different from other boys his age. Now he understood why. But he was afraid that if people knew the truth, they would treat him badly. Millfield was a small conservative town where most people went to church and held traditional values. The boys decided to keep their new relationship completely secret. They would continue acting like best friends in public. Nobody could know what had really happened between them. This decision felt necessary, but it also made their situation much more complicated. At school, they had to be very careful about how they acted around each other. Jake started flirting with girls to throw people off their trail. He asked Amanda Brooks, a cheerleader, to be his study partner for history class. Amanda was pretty and popular. Dating her would make Jake look normal to everyone else. Ryan watched Jake flirt with Amanda and felt jealous and hurt. He understood why Jake was doing it, but that did not make it easier to watch. Ryan started spending more time alone in the photography darkroom where nobody could see his true emotions. The boys found ways to spend time together in private. They would meet at the old abandoned barn on the Miller property. The barn had been empty for years. Nobody ever went there anymore. It became their secret place where they could be themselves without worrying about being discovered. During these secret meetings, Jake and Ryan talked about their feelings and their fears. They held hands and shared kisses away from the watching eyes of their families and classmates. These moments were the happiest times in both of their lives, but they were also filled with anxiety about being caught. Jake struggled with his identity more than Ryan did. Some days he felt sure about his feelings for Ryan. Other days he wondered if he was just confused or going through a phase. He worried that these feelings would ruin his chances of getting a football scholarship. He had worked so hard for his future, and now everything felt uncertain. Ryan was more sure about his feelings, but he was also more dependent on Jake's attention and affection. When Jake was distant or seemed uncertain, Ryan would panic. He was afraid that Jake would decide their relationship was a mistake and end things between them. Their secret relationship continued for several weeks into the school year. They developed a system of coded text messages to communicate when they wanted to meet. They used phrases about homework and football practice that really meant something else entirely. But keeping such a big secret was exhausting for both boys. They had to constantly watch their behavior and words. They lived in fear of someone discovering their truth. The pressure was slowly building, and cracks were starting to show in their carefully constructed facade. Neither Jake nor Ryan realized that their secret was putting them on a dangerous path. The stress of hiding their relationship was changing, both of them in ways that would eventually lead to tragedy. Winter came early to Millfield that year. By November, snow covered the football field and ice formed on the windows of Millfield High School. The football season was over, and Jake Henderson had led his team to their best record in 10 years. College scouts had been calling every week with offers and promises. Jake carried a thick folder of letters from universities across the country. Ohio State University was still his first choice, but other schools were offering him full scholarships, too. His parents were proud and excited about his future. His father, Tom, talked about Jake's success to everyone at the car dealership where he worked. But Jake was not as happy as everyone expected him to be. The pressure of his secret relationship with Ryan was wearing him down. Every day felt like walking on thin ice. He was tired of pretending and lying to everyone he cared about. Ryan could see that Jake was struggling. During their secret meetings in the old barn, Jake seemed distant and worried. He would stare out the broken windows, instead of talking. Sometimes he would not show up at their planned meeting times at all. This made Ryan feel scared and abandoned. The barn had become their only safe space, but even that felt dangerous now. It was cold and drafty in the winter months. They had to bring blankets and wear heavy coats during their meetings. The romance, that had felt exciting in the summer, now felt desperate and sad. Jake started talking about their future more often, but not in the way Ryan wanted to hear. Jake would say things like, "When I go to college, everything will be different, and we need to think about what happens after graduation." These conversations always ended with Ryan feeling upset and Jake feeling guilty. Ryan was becoming more and more dependent on their relationship. While Jake was pulling away, Ryan was holding on tighter. He started following Jake around school more than usual. He would wait by Jake's locker between classes. He would watch Jake during football practice from the stands, even when the weather was terrible. Other students began to notice Ryan's behavior. Some of Jake's teammates made jokes about Ryan always being around. They called Ryan Jake's shadow and laughed when Ryan showed up to every practice. These comments made Jake uncomfortable and embarrassed. Amanda Brooks, the cheerleader who had been spending time with Jake, also noticed the situation. She liked Jake and wanted to date him seriously, but she could see that Jake's attention was often somewhere else. She started asking Jake questions about his friendship with Ryan that Jake could not answer honestly. The stress was affecting both boys in different ways. Jake became more aggressive during the remaining football games. He would tackle harder than necessary and argue with referees. His coaches noticed the change but thought it was just the pressure of college recruiting. Ryan's behavior was more obvious to his teachers. He stopped participating in class discussions. His photography work became darker and more disturbing. Mrs. Patterson, his art teacher, was worried about the images Ryan was developing. Many of his recent photos showed empty places and broken things. At home, both families noticed changes, but did not understand what was causing them. Linda Henderson saw that Jake was not eating as much at dinner. He would sit at the table and push his food around on his plate. When she asked if something was wrong, Jake would say he was just tired from football and studying. Beth Miller noticed that Ryan was spending even more time alone in his room. She would find him at his computer late at night, editing photographs or writing in his journal. When she tried to talk to him, Ryan would give short answers and ask to be left alone. The parents of both boys assumed that senior year stress was normal. College applications and graduation planning were big changes for any teenager. They did not realize that their sons were carrying a much heavier burden than typical teenage worries. Jake's relationship with Amanda Brooks became more serious during the winter months. Amanda was patient and understanding when Jake seemed distracted. She thought he was just focused on football and college planning. She had no idea that Jake was using their relationship to hide his true feelings. Ryan watched Jake and Amanda together and felt his heart breaking a little more each day. He saw them holding hands in the hallways and sitting together at lunch. When Amanda came to Jake's games, she would wear his extra jersey and cheer loudly from the bleachers. Ryan felt like he was watching his life fall apart. The secret meetings in the barn became less frequent and more tense. Jake would often arrive late and want to leave early. He would talk about college and his future plans without including Ryan in those dreams. Ryan would beg Jake to promise that their relationship would continue even after graduation. These conversations always ended in arguments now. Jake would say that Ryan was being too demanding and emotional. Ryan would accuse Jake of using him and planning to abandon him. Both boys would leave these meetings feeling angry and hurt. By February, Jake had made his decision about college. He accepted the full scholarship offer from Ohio State University. The local newspaper wrote a story about him with his picture on the front page. The whole town was excited and proud of their local football hero. Ryan felt like Jake's college acceptance was the beginning of the end for them. Ohio State was 3 hours away from Millfield. Jake would be living in a dormitory with other college students. He would make new friends and probably find a girlfriend. There would be no place in that new life for Ryan. The pressure of keeping their secret was becoming unbearable for both boys. Jake was exhausted from living two different lives. Ryan was becoming obsessed with holding on to something that was slipping away from him. Neither boy knew how to handle the situation they had created. Spring was coming to Millfield, and with it would come graduation and the end of their time together. The foundation of their relationship was cracking under the weight of secrecy and fear. Soon those cracks would split completely apart, leading both boys down a path toward tragedy that neither of them could imagine. Spring arrived in Millfield with warmer weather and longer days. The snow melted from the football field, and flowers began blooming in the school courtyard. For most seniors at Millfield High School, spring meant excitement about graduation and summer plans. But for Jake Henderson and Ryan Miller, spring brought tension that was about to explode. Jake had been thinking for weeks about how to handle his situation with Ryan. College was only 4 months away. His relationship with Amanda Brooks was getting more serious, and people expected them to go to prom together. Jake felt trapped between the life everyone expected him to live and the secret he had been keeping with Ryan. On a warm Tuesday morning, in early April, Jake made the decision that would change everything. He had spent the night lying awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about his future. He knew that continuing his secret relationship with Ryan would only make things harder for both of them. It was time to end things before someone got hurt. Jake waited until lunch period to talk to Ryan. They met behind the school building where they used to eat their sandwiches when they were younger. Ryan could tell something was wrong by the serious look on Jake's face. Jake had been acting strange for days, avoiding their usual text messages and skipping their meetings at the barn. Jake told Ryan that their romantic relationship had to end. He said that they both needed to focus on their futures and stop living in a fantasy. Jake explained that he was going to college and wanted a fresh start. He said they could still be friends, but nothing more than that. Ryan felt like the world was falling apart around him. He had been expecting this conversation, but hearing the words still felt like a punch in the stomach. Ryan begged Jake to reconsider. He promised that they could make a long-distance relationship work. He said he would apply to colleges near Ohio State so they could stay together, but Jake had already made up his mind. He told Ryan that their secret relationship had become too stressful and complicated. He said that hiding their feelings was making him feel sick and anxious all the time. Jake wanted to be normal and live the life that everyone expected him to live. The conversation ended with both boys feeling angry and hurt. Ryan accused Jake of using him and then throwing him away when it became inconvenient. Jake said that Ryan was being selfish and not thinking about their futures realistically. They both said things that they would later wish they could take. Back after that day, Jake started avoiding Ryan completely. He would take different routes between classes so they would not run into each other in the hallways. He sat with his football teammates at lunch instead of their usual table. When Ryan tried to approach him, Jake would find excuses to leave or talk to other people. Ryan felt abandoned and desperate. The person who had been the most important part of his life for months was now treating him like a stranger. Ryan could not understand how Jake could just turn off his feelings and act like their relationship had never happened. Jake threw himself into his relationship with Amanda Brooks. He asked her to prom officially, buying her a corsage and making dinner reservations at the fanciest restaurant in town. Amanda was thrilled and started planning their outfits and making arrangements with other couples. She had no idea that Jake was using their relationship to distract himself from his pain over Ryan. Ryan watched all of this happening and felt his heart breaking more each day. He started skipping classes and spending hours alone in the photography darkroom. His pictures became even darker and more disturbing. He took photos of dead birds, broken windows, and empty graves in the town cemetery. Mrs. Patterson, the photography teacher, became concerned about Ryan's work and his behavior. She tried to talk to him several times, but Ryan would just mumble short answers and ask to be left alone. She considered calling his parents, but decided to wait and see if his mood improved. 2 weeks before prom, Ryan discovered something that made his pain even worse. He overheard Amanda talking to her friends about her plans for prom night. Amanda was planning to tell Jake that she loved him. She was also hinting that she wanted their relationship to become more serious and physical. This news sent Ryan into a panic. The idea of Jake being intimate with Amanda was more than Ryan could handle. He felt like Jake was not only abandoning him, but also replacing him completely. Ryan started following Jake around more obsessively, watching him from a distance, and taking pictures of him without permission. Jake noticed that Ryan was following him and taking photos. This made Jake feel uncomfortable and angry. During a particularly bad day, Jake confronted Ryan in the school parking lot after classes. Several students watched as Jake told Ryan to leave him alone and stop acting like a stalker. The public argument was embarrassing for both boys. Students who witnessed it started gossiping about what might have caused their friendship to fall apart so dramatically. Some people speculated that they had fought over a girl or had some kind of disagreement about college plans. Nobody guessed the real reason behind their conflict. After the parking lot confrontation, Ryan felt humiliated and even more desperate. He had lost not only his romantic relationship with Jake but also their friendship. The person who had been his best friend since childhood was now treating him like an enemy. Ryan started spending his evenings driving around Millfield in his car. He would park outside the Henderson house and watch Jake's bedroom window. Sometimes, he would see Jake and Amanda studying together or talking on the phone. These glimpses into Jake's new life without him made Ryan feel sick with jealousy and sadness. Jake was trying his best to move on, but he was also struggling with guilt and sadness about losing Ryan. Despite his decision to end their romantic relationship, Jake still cared about Ryan and missed their friendship. But Jake felt like there was no way to go back to being just friends after everything that had happened between them. The situation was becoming more dangerous with each passing day. Ryan's behavior was becoming more erratic and obsessive. Jake was feeling increasingly uncomfortable and worried about what Ryan might do. Both boys were carrying intense emotions that they could not share with anyone else. Neither Jake nor Ryan realized how close they were to a breaking point that would change both of their lives forever. The spring that should have been filled with excitement about graduation and new beginnings was instead building toward a tragedy that would shock their entire community. May 17th started as a normal Thursday in Millfield. The sun was shining, and students at Millfield High School were excited because graduation was only 2 weeks away. Jake Henderson attended all of his classes and seemed to be in a good mood. He had lunch with Amanda Brooks and his football teammates. Everything appeared normal to everyone who saw him that day. Ryan Miller did not attend school that Thursday. He had been skipping classes more often since his confrontation with Jake in the parking lot. His parents were worried about his attendance, but Ryan always made excuses about being sick or having headaches. They did not realize how serious his emotional problems had become. Ryan spent the morning driving around Millfield in his old blue Honda Civic. He drove past all the places where he and Jake had spent time together over the years. He went to the elementary school playground where they had played as children. He parked outside the movie theater where they had seen their first R-rated movie together when they were 14. Around noon, Ryan drove to the abandoned barn on his family's property. This place held special memories for him because it was where he and Jake had shared their most intimate moments together. Ryan sat in the dusty barn for hours, looking at old photographs of Jake that he kept in his camera bag. As the afternoon wore on, Ryan's emotions became more intense. He felt angry at Jake for abandoning him. He felt sad about losing his best friend and first love. Most of all, he felt desperate because he could not imagine his life without Jake in it. Ryan knew that graduation was approaching fast, and soon, Jake would leave for college forever. Ryan decided that he needed to see Jake one more time. He wanted to try to convince Jake to give their relationship another chance. Ryan believed that if he could just talk to Jake alone, away from all the pressure and other people, maybe Jake would remember how good things used to be between them. Depi. 6 o'clock that evening, Ryan sent Jake a text message. The message said, "We need to talk one last time before graduation. Please meet me at our place tonight at 9. I have something important to give you." Ryan was referring to the old barn, where they used to meet in secret. Jake saw the text message while he was eating dinner with his family. His parents were talking excitedly about his upcoming graduation party and his plans for college orientation in August. Jake felt his stomach tighten when he read Ryan's message. He had been trying to avoid Ryan for weeks, and he did not want to have another difficult conversation. Jake ignored the first text message and tried to focus on dinner with his family. But Ryan sent several more messages over the next hour. Each message became more desperate and pleading. Ryan wrote things like, "Please, Jake, just give me 30 minutes, and this will be the last time I ask you for anything." Finally, Jake replied to Ryan's messages. He wrote back, "I told you we have nothing more to talk about, leave me alone." But Ryan continued sending messages. He promised that he just wanted to return some of Jake's belongings that he still had. He said he would never bother Jake again after this one meeting. Jake felt guilty and frustrated. Part of him wanted to help Ryan find closure so they could both move on with their lives. Another part of him was afraid that meeting with Ryan would just make things more complicated and emotional. Jake had been feeling better since he stopped seeing Ryan, and he did not want to go backwards. At 8:30 that evening, Jake made the decision that would change everything. He sent Ryan a text message saying, "Fine. One last time, 30 minutes only." Jake told his parents that he was going to drive around town for a while to clear his head before studying for his final exams. Linda Henderson kissed her son goodbye and told him not to stay out too late. She had no idea that this would be the last time she would ever see Jake alive. Tom Henderson was watching television and just waved from his recliner chair. Neither parent was worried about Jake going out alone. Millfield was a safe town where serious crimes almost never happened. Jake drove his red pickup truck to the Miller property around 9 o'clock. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning orange and purple. Jake parked next to the old barn and saw that Ryan's blue Honda was already there. Jake sat in his truck for a few minutes trying to decide if he really wanted to go through with this meeting. Ryan had been waiting in the barn for over an hour. He had brought a small box containing some of Jake's belongings that he wanted to return. The box had a few t-shirts that Jake had left at Ryan's house, some CDs they had shared, and a friendship bracelet that Jake had made for Ryan when they were 12 years old. But Ryan had also brought something else to the barn that night. Hidden in his jacket pocket was a hunting knife that belonged to his father, Mark. Ryan had taken the knife from his father's workshop earlier that day. He told himself that he just wanted to have some protection in case Jake became angry or violent during their conversation. When Jake finally walked into the barn, both boys felt nervous and uncomfortable. They had not been alone together in over a month. Jake looked around the barn and remembered all the times they had met there in secret. Those memories made him feel sad and guilty about how their relationship had ended. Ryan tried to start the conversation calmly. He gave Jake the box of belongings and thanked him for coming to meet with him. Ryan said that he understood why Jake wanted to end their romantic relationship, but he hoped they could still be friends like they used to be when they were children. Jake accepted the box but told Ryan that he thought it would be better if they did not try to be friends right now. Jake said that too much had happened between them, and he needed space to focus on his future. Jake explained that he was planning to start fresh in college without any complicated relationships from his past. This was not what Ryan wanted to hear. Ryan started crying and begging Jake to reconsider. He said that their friendship was the most important thing in his life, and he could not imagine living without it. Ryan promised that he would never bring up their romantic relationship again. If Jake would just agree to stay friends. Jake felt terrible seeing Ryan so upset, but he also felt angry that Ryan was trying to manipulate him with tears and guilt. Jake said that their friendship had been ruined by their romantic relationship, and there was no way to go back to the way things used to be. The conversation became more heated as both boys expressed their hurt and anger. Jake said that Ryan had become too obsessed and dependent on him. Ryan accused Jake of being selfish and cruel. They said harsh things to each other that they had never said before. Finally, Jake told Ryan that he had to accept that their relationship was over forever. Jake said that he was planning to marry Amanda Brooks someday and have a normal family. Jake said that what had happened between him and Ryan was just a phase that he wanted to forget about completely. These words sent Ryan into a rage. The idea that Jake thought their love was just a phase made Ryan feel like everything they had shared together was meaningless. Ryan felt like Jake was not only abandoning him, but also denying that their relationship had ever been real or important. In that moment of intense anger and pain, Ryan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his father's hunting knife. At 11:47 p.m. on May 17th, the Millfield Police Department received a 911 call that would change the quiet town forever. The caller was Ryan Miller, and his voice was shaking as he spoke to the emergency operator. Ryan said that he had found his best friend Jake Henderson dead in an old barn on his family's property. Police officers and paramedics arrived at the Miller farm within 10 minutes of the call. They found Ryan sitting on the ground outside the barn, covered in blood and crying hysterically. Inside the barn, they discovered Jake Henderson's body. Jake had suffered multiple stab wounds to his chest and stomach. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Detective Sarah Williams was the first investigator to arrive at the crime scene. She had been working for the Millfield Police Department for 15 years, but she had never seen anything like this before. Most crimes in Millfield were small things like shoplifting or drunk driving. A violent murder was almost unheard of in their peaceful community. Ryan told the police that he had come to the barn to meet Jake around 9 o'clock. He said that Jake wanted to return some items that Ryan had left at his house. According to Ryan's first story, he had arrived at the barn and found Jake already dead. Ryan claimed that he did not see who had attacked Jake, but Detective Williams noticed several things that did not make sense about Ryan's story. Ryan's clothes were covered in blood, but he claimed he had only touched Jake to check if he was still alive. The amount of blood on Ryan's shirt and hands suggested much more contact with the victim than he was admitting to. The detective also found it strange that nothing had been stolen from Jake's body. Jake was still wearing his expensive watch and had $40 in his wallet. If this had been a robbery, the attacker would have taken these valuable items. Within hours of the discovery, Detective Williams and her team found more evidence that contradicted Ryan's story. They discovered text messages between the two boys that showed they had planned to meet at the barn. The messages also revealed that their relationship had been much more complicated than a simple friendship. The murder weapon was found in the woods about 50 yards from the barn. It was a hunting knife that belonged to Ryan's father, Mark Miller. When police questioned Mark about the knife, he said that it had been missing from his workshop for several days. He had not reported it missing because he thought he had simply misplaced it. On the morning of May 18th, less than 12 hours after Jake's body was discovered, Detective Williams arrested Ryan Miller for the murder of his best friend. Ryan was taken to the county jail and held without bond while the investigation continued. The news of Jake's murder and Ryan's arrest shocked everyone in Millfield. People could not believe that one of their own teenagers had killed another. Jake Henderson had been the pride of the town, and Ryan Miller had seemed like a quiet, harmless boy. Nobody could understand what had driven Ryan to commit such a violent act. Jake's funeral was held 3 days after his death. The entire town seemed to attend the service at St. Mary's Catholic Church. The church was so crowded that people had to stand outside in the parking lot. Jake's football teammates served as pallbearers, carrying his coffin while tears streamed down their faces. Amanda Brooks spoke at the funeral about her love for Jake and her dreams for their future together. She had no idea about the secret relationship between Jake and Ryan. Like everyone else in town, Amanda was confused about why Ryan had killed his best friend. The Henderson family was devastated by their loss. Tom Henderson took time off from work at the car dealership because he could not stop crying. Linda Henderson had to be sedated by her doctor because she was having panic attacks. They could not understand how the boy they had treated like a second son could have murdered their Jake. The Miller family was also destroyed by the tragedy, but in a different way. Mark and Beth Miller felt guilty and responsible for what their son had done. They received angry phone calls and hate mail from people in town who blamed them for raising a killer. Eventually, they decided to sell their house and move away from Millfield. Ryan's trial began 8 months after Jake's death. The courthouse in Millfield had to bring in extra security because so many people wanted to attend. Local television, news stations covered the trial every day. The small town that had never experienced serious crime was suddenly in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. During the trial, the full story of Jake and Ryan's secret relationship was revealed to the public for the first time. Prosecutors presented evidence from text messages, diary entries, and witness testimony that showed the two boys had been romantically involved for several months before the murder. Many people in Millfield were shocked to learn about the secret relationship. Some community members felt sympathy for both boys, understanding that they had been struggling with difficult emotions in a place where their relationship could not be accepted. Others felt angry, and believed that Ryan's sexuality was no excuse for murder. Ryan's defense attorney argued that Ryan had been suffering from severe depression and emotional disturbance when he killed Jake. The lawyer said that Ryan had not planned the murder but had acted in a moment of intense emotional pain when Jake rejected him completely. But the prosecution argued that Ryan's behavior in the weeks before the murder showed that he had been planning to hurt Jake. They pointed to evidence that Ryan had been stalking Jake and taking photographs of him without permission. They said that bringing the knife to their meeting proved that Ryan had intended to use violence. After 3 days of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated for 6 hours before reaching their verdict. Ryan Miller was found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Jake Henderson. The judge sentenced Ryan to 25 years to life in prison. Ryan showed no emotion when the verdict was read. He was now 18 years old and would spend most of his adult life in prison for killing his first love and best friend. Ryan was transferred to the Chillicothe Correctional Institution, where he remains today. 5 years have passed since the tragedy that changed Millfield forever. The Henderson family established a scholarship in Jake's memory that helps local students attend college. They still live in the same house on Maple Street, but they have never been the same since losing their son. The Miller family moved to another state and changed their last name. They rarely speak about what happened and have tried to build a new life away from the memories and judgment of their former community. The old barn where Jake died was torn down by the Miller family before they moved away. The property remains empty, and local children are forbidden by their parents from playing there. Ryan Miller is now 23 years old and has spent 5 years in prison. He has given several interviews to journalists and documentary filmmakers about what happened that night in the barn. Ryan says that he regrets his actions every day and wishes he could bring Jake back to life. In his most recent interview, Ryan said that he never intended to hurt Jake when he brought the knife to their meeting. He said that he only wanted to scare Jake into giving their relationship another chance. But when Jake said that their love had been meaningless and just a phase, Ryan felt like his whole world was ending. Ryan will be eligible for parole when he is 43 years old. If he is released from prison, he plans to leave Ohio and start a new life somewhere else where nobody knows about his past. The tragedy of Jake Henderson and Ryan Miller serves as a reminder of the dangers of secrets, isolation, and untreated mental health problems. It also shows how quickly love can turn into violence when people feel desperate and alone. Millfield has slowly healed from the trauma of the murder, but the town will never forget the night when 2 childhood friends met in an old barn and only one of them came home alive.